Just checking my audio real fast. Probably a little loud. Oh, echo, right. Alrighty, how about this? Audio check. Hello, hello. Welcome back to the stream, or this week's dev stream. This week, I hope my audio is a little better. Let me check the stream myself, see how I sound. 1 second. I think it sounds pretty good. Alright, minus the static from when I turn my mic off and on, but we'll just leave it on. And yeah, so this week we were chatting on the Discord a little bit about an old StarCraft map that I and some other people liked, and I thought that I would try and build it from scratch, see how far we can get in just a couple hours on stream. It's always fun to start a new project on stream, so it seems like a good standalone project that we can kind of design a little bit up front and then jump in, try and structure things well, try and move fast. It's good practice either way. But yeah, I will go ahead and start us off a new project in Unity, but while that happens, I'll talk a little bit about what the game is. Basically, if you are unfamiliar with Nexus Word Wars, it was a custom map in StarCraft where each player had a nexus or like a home base, home building, and you can spawn units from there that go and attack your enemies. So that was pretty standard with the StarCraft controls. You just select your building, press the hotkey to spawn the unit that you want. But the fun part came in the typing part of the game, where every unit spawned comes with a word on top of its head, and for your opponent to kill that unit, they had to type that word. Seems simple enough. It's pretty straightforward for a typing game, but what you see is there's a little bit of strategy that creeps up in like whether you spawn a whole bunch of small units that are easy to type words, or whether you save up for bigger units that are harder to type, or whether you build a little bit of both. And there's some fun strategy that will emerge there, but basically it's a like 1v1 or could be bigger typing game where you are basically competing against somebody else to type better than them. And so it's not necessarily the same vein as like Type Racer, where it's just seeing who can type the fastest words per minute or the highest accuracy. There's a little bit of like strategy under the hood, but for the most part, it is just a typing game with some twist on top. So that's the gist. Visually, it's obviously was made in the StarCraft engine, so we're thinking 3D game, top-down camera. Probably control the camera with WASD just so you don't have to use your mouse at all. And I think once we start building out some of the blocks of it, you'll see a little more. But let's go ahead and jump on in. We'll call it Word Wars. And we will make a short plan up front. We're going to try and move fast this week so we can get as much done as we can in 2 or 3 hours on stream. But I think we can get to a pretty playable point at the end. Might not be pretty, but I think if you can play a game that doesn't have any like graphics or sound effects or like story, music, etc., and it's still fun, I think that means you got a pretty good, fun game on your hands, and that's when you want to go in and kind of add all that stuff in so you can make it more visually appealing. I think if it's not fun with just those core building blocks, there's probably a little more work to do. So what we try and do each week is either continue working on games that we've been working on or try and build out something new. And just kind of see what's fun, what's not. If you're not familiar, I am Andrew. I'm one of 2 Andrews at the Chroma Golem game studio. We mostly work with AI and AI in gaming, so building out both libraries for developers to use that helps with the development process, or libraries that let developers add AI to games. We use a lot of those in our own games, so a lot of our focus is trying to figure out how AI is best used in games, or how we can specifically like create more emergent mechanics in games with AI. And so there probably won't be a lot of AI this week, since we're just kind of speedrunning the basic bones of this game to see what's fun, but could come later. If anybody has any ideas for what it could be used for, I'm all ears. You can join our Discord in the description of this video, or just plop it in the chat. But basically, what we want to do, let me grab us up a little notepad window. We want to have 2 players, and this will probably be multiplayer later, but for the time being we will say human versus AI, just for the ease of development. For each player, you have a home base building that spawns units, There's a path between the two home bases that units walk on, and units just go to the enemy base to destroy it. And players can type the words on a unit to destroy it. And we can add in stuff like resources and costs and all that jazz later for like balancing. We're just going to try and get this core mechanics working up front, but that's where a lot of the fun comes in, I think. And we'll probably... I mean, I guess give the bases some health, stuff like that. But this is like, if you distill it down, what you're doing is you're spawning units to go attack the enemy, and the enemy is also spawning units to go attack you, and you just need to type those words on those units to not be destroyed. It's pretty simple. So we're going to set up a basic scene real fast. Let's call this our battle scene. And let's go ahead and make some space for our scene. And what we're going to do is kind of just block out the map. Let's reset all this. We've got, let's do a guess we will just give ourselves a little flat terrain real fast. Let's see. I forget where the center point is. I think that's probably centered. Yeah. So obviously we don't need all that terrain, but it's fine for now. Just gives us a collision floor that we can work with. Let's put that in there. We also want, let's do a cylinder for each base. Let's scale those down a little bit. And maybe make them larger. And we'll give it some materials to give it some color in a bit, but let's just get two bases in real fast, right next to each other. We'll set the positions on the unit of where they're running to, so we can move them around later and it should still work. Let's say player base and enemy base. So each of those should, well, they will probably have a dynamic spawn later of just, like, if something spawns here that's going here, you want to spawn it next to it on this side, but if it's going over there, you want to spawn over here. But for the sake of skipping all that code and getting a playable demo fast, let's go ahead and say spawn point for each of these bases. We will set it over here and maybe up a little bit. 0.5 is good. We'll add another spawn point for the enemy, which is over here. And let's just say 0.7 and do the opposite over here. Should line up maybe? Yeah. Cool. So now we have two bases. We have ours, we have the enemies. The units will spawn here. We want to, let's create a prefab for just a plain old unit. Let's give them a capsule. And obviously we want to have lots of different kinds of units later, so you can choose between like small, medium, and large units, or easy, medium, hard. But for now, it's actually, this guy is pretty large. Let's take these, let's drop them over, and let's make them also a lot larger, just to kind of get our scaling right for blocking out the map. So we got 4, half, and 4. Let's do the same over here. And we'll move it over 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. -30. Cool. We'll double check our spawn points are still correct. Yeah. So we will say this is a unit, a generic unit. He'll start here. When you spawn him, he will start running over. You gotta type his word in order to destroy him. And likewise, if the enemy spawns one, he'll start walking over this way. You gotta type his word to destroy him. So let's start creating our prefabs so we can get into the code, but we'll have them ready for us. So that's just a unit, and the things that we need are, well, I guess we probably just want to double check our colliders real fast, make sure this unit doesn't fall through the floor, make sure the bases don't fall through the floor. Looks fine. Nobody's falling. If I put that guy in, I guess he doesn't even have a rigid body, which is fine because we'll probably control the body manually. We'll get to that in the script. But let's go ahead and add a human player controller. This will handle toggling our input box for typing, and also handle when the input box is off, we will allow the player to be typing words for, or typing letters to spawn units. So we will go ahead and start with that code. And I switched to dark mode this week just for everyone's eyeballs. Trying it out. We'll see if I stick with it. It's fine so far. Cool. So the things that we want in our human player controller is we want a dictionary of key codes to game objects for spawnable units, which actually we probably can't serialize properly in the editor. Yeah, that's fine. We'll just say we can do this mapping with in a proper way later. We'll say public list game object spawnable units, and we'll just map that to 1, 2, 3, 4 or so. So that guy gets a unit, which will map to just the number 1. And we will go ahead and say public update. We want a, I'm just gonna make everything real fast. We got a private is input box open false. So that'll be our, whether there's like a text box open to type into, or whether you're issuing commands to the building. So we'll say if input box is open, then we can be typing into it. We'll probably just inputs. But if the box is not open, then we want to issue commands to our Nexus. So alpha 1 is indeed what we want. We will say game object, spawnable unit 0. We actually want that to happen at public transform spawn position, which we'll set to that spawn position that we built in the map. We will get to this. Looks like it's jumping ahead of us. So let's go ahead and fix our error first of all. Right, dot position. Then it'll compile and we can set our spawn position to spawn points transform. And that should already be enough. If we jump into the game, we focus the window, we press 1, we get a unit. If we keep pressing 1, we get more units, which you can see. Obviously they're stacking because they're not running over yet, but that's the gist there. So we will say more units here, and that's where we'll use our dictionary of mapping key codes to units. We also want to draw that input box, which we'll use a UI canvas for, I think, so we can get TextMesh Pro in and be real pros. So let's go ahead and import TMP, get that going. We have our canvas, which I guess makes sense as backwards. Does it? Is that just because it instantiated at the position I was at? Let's see if I can reset this transform. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. So we actually, was there a TextMesh Pro for input? Input field. That's what we actually want. So here, can't click. Here we want to draw input field probably like 2/3 of the way down the screen, and we want it to be decently large. We'll just have large font. We will style it a little better later, but let's do a point size of like 28, maybe 36. We want to center that text, probably. I guess that's fine, that's fine. We will say it is interactable, and I think that's really all we need. So back to our game manager, or our player controller, I guess. We also want to toggle that on and off if the player presses enter. So we will go ahead and create our public TMP Pro input. Forget what it's called. TextMesh Pro UGI dot something. Let's just say what have we got here? Editor panel, input field. Cool, so we say if input dot get key down, key code dot enter. not keypad enter, but just, I guess, return. Then we will toggle is input box open, and we'll also update that, which, what does activate input field do? I feel like we need to enable and disable it. Let's say let's find out. Used to activate the input field, allowing the user to start typing or entering text. So is it like a focus? And deactivate would be like a blur. Input box should be closed. Such a weird nomenclature if that's what it's for. But we'll give it a shot, we'll see what happens. We do want that to also toggle enabling and disabling though, because we don't always want to see it. So we will go ahead and let's just test out, see what happens when we start and deactivate it, and then what we want to see is it disappears. Right, we gotta set that reference real fast. So our input field is here. So ideally it should disappear when we start, which it did not do. And when we press enter, it does just focus and blur. Okay, so that's fine. We also want to say .set that game object .set enabled, set active. So we want to do the same here and the opposite here. Cool, so that should now hide it when we start. Pressing enter should show it. And pressing enter again should hide it. Awesome, that works. Can we type in it? We can. Cool. So that's really all we need for like the player setup. What we're missing now is the logic of the units running to the enemy base and assigning a word to each unit and handling the processing of when you're done typing a word, what units get destroyed. So let's go ahead and let's mock that out real fast. We'll say private void handle typed word, string word, and when we deactivate the box, we want to first say string typed word is equal to input field dot text, and then we will handle that word. So if you type bug, we'll just say that for now. Let's double check it works, but that's where we will iterate through all the item or the units and see if any have that word assigned. So if we say hello in our console, we now have hello. One thing we're missing is we want to clear that text as well. So now every time you press enter to open it up, you get a new fresh box. Hello, we get typed hello, you open it up, you get a new one. Cool. Okay, so let's simplify this a little bit and just say if it's not open, then we can issue spawn stuff. Let's start on our unit logic. Let's say, we could just do like a unit controller, or we could break it up into a couple different scripts. Let's just say unit controller. We'll just put it all in one for now. We could have like stats on one script and movement on one script, like attacking on one script that depends on stats, but it's probably fine to strip all that out later. So this actually looks pretty decent. We don't necessarily, let's accept that, but we don't need an owner yet. We want a move speed specifically because we also want, I guess attack cooldown handles attack speed. This guy is obviously private if we're counting down until the next attack. Range, attack. Yeah, this seems fine. What we'll probably end up doing is having like a rock, paper, scissors pattern of units you can spawn. So if you press 1, you get a tanky unit that's slow and has a lot of health. I guess health is one thing we're missing. And that'll be, I think we want to allow the units to attack each other and not just go straight to the enemy base. So you'll see a lot more like skirmishes of the units, and the units that you spawn will make a little more of a difference. And you'll be able to kind of help in those battles by typing if you have a lot of rocks that are weak to the paper units, you could be typing all the words of the enemy's paper units so your rocks can get through to their scissors or whatever. So it just gives a little more that works. Maybe we want like tanky melee unit, ranged magic unit, and like a short range archer. We'll say so rock's going to be weak to paper because there's such a long range, they'll just plunk those rocks down before they get to them. Paper is weak to scissors because scissors will get in and they'll be a little more tanky, I guess. We'll figure all that out later. But this is our unit controller. For logic, we also want a public vector. Yeah, we'll say vector 3 target position. Or I guess maybe like game object enemy base. In case bases move. We'll see. And just every tick we will walk towards the enemy base, which I'm sure GPT can write for us now that we have all these variables. Cool. This looks correct. We get the right direction and we move at our move speed times that delta time. We might need to increase our move speed a little bit, but we will check that. Let's see what, well, we're not setting the enemy base quite yet, so we can't do that, but we can jump back here and say unit controller. I mean, I think if we, oh, I see. Sound quality is great. Awesome. That's good to hear. It's not too loud. My OBS bar goes full red every time I talk, which I prefer over being too quiet because I can just turn it down. But I've got a boost of like 10 decibels, so there's also some more filters I can do on the audio to like clamp the high end and stuff if it's clipping at all, but glad that it's working. But on the units, if this were more than a 1v1, I think what we would want to do is set like our owner as it was, and then have the logic on the actual unit of hunting down like the closest enemy to the fight. But I think putting that logic on the unit right now doesn't make a lot of sense because it's we can just simplify the unit a lot more if it's a simple, almost projectile of like you give it a destination and it just keeps going there and fights anything along the way. So we're going to go ahead and say set target, and we can always reuse that function later if we want to move that logic into the unit class. So we'll say set target of that, which we'll go ahead and set this guy private, which is what we should have done. Excuse me. So now our update function will always be moving towards the enemy base. And let's say human player controller. You know, we'll just code in enemy base for now. It's not the best for scaling up the number of players, but otherwise we can structure it like basically what we would do here is say like find nearest enemy base, and I'm sure we could just get objects by tag of base and then filter them by the ones that have the AI player controller or human player controller, and just set the target of the nearest one. But I mean, I guess it's not that much. It's not that much harder. We can go ahead and give that a shot. Let's tag both our player base and our enemy base with a base tag, and we will just get all objects with that base tag, filter out our current base, and then set the next base as the target. So we'll say find the nearest enemy base by saying var all bases equal to that, but it's actually just base, and we want to not our base is just trying to get this to filter. Okay, so that actually we want base controller. We want human player controller. So since in this demo we're going to give it an AI controller, we'll go ahead and we'll just say enemy bases is all bases, or all objects with the base tag, first base, where object.id get instance ID, hopefully that's unique enough, is not equal to this get instance ID. So just the first base that isn't this base is what we're rolling with. And I do want to, let's go ahead and print that out because I want to make sure that that's working as expected. So we'll say our instance ID and I guess we can look a little bit into how this works. Say, will this be unique between different objects? Unique modifier identifier for the current instance. Since each object has a unique identifier. Okay, that seems fine. Let's see how it works real fast. Okay, that doesn't really tell us anything. And let's go ahead and say debug.log enemy instance ID is equal to, this is now actually a game object of enemy base, because we are doing first, which just returns the first one instead of a list. So let's open that up, let's hit 1 and let's print out both of those IDs. But first, let's make sure we got all our references set. We need that enemy base, which I guess no we don't. But now we'll give it a shot. Or maybe we did, I guess. Right. So our unit is trying, the unit that we added, this guy, is trying to walk away without having a base set. We'll delete him because here is where we want to set that base, so he'll always have a base. We could actually, let's throw him over here, and let's give him the enemy base as a target anyway. Right, forgot I made that private. It's fine, we'll delete him, because we're gonna make new guys. Cool, so now if I press 1, we should get a guy, little guy, and in our console, before all this garbage, sequence has no matching element, so it didn't find a base. Our instance ID is set, but it didn't find the enemy base, which does not have the base tag, which is why. Neither of them have the base tag, actually. Let's set those properly. Let's go back in. We'll create a little lad and then check those IDs. So 1, also you can see him moving. This is our ID, this is their ID. Looks unique enough to me. He's headed towards them. If I go ahead and create a couple more, we just get a steady stream of little lads running to the enemy base. Awesome. Which need to be lifted up a little bit, I guess. Just a little bit. Let's bring up these spawn points up to Y1. And that should get them spawning at the right Y level. And now, we can go ahead and start adding the word lists for the units. But I think, well, I guess we can hold off on the easy, medium, and hard units. We'll just get one word list for our generic unit first, and then we will go ahead and split it out into different kinds. So let's go over to this guy. Let's give him a TextMesh Pro in world space, which I think we can do here. We'll say word. Let's center that. Let's actually kind of resize it a little bit too. font size is huge, but we kind of want it to be huge because this is a small guy in a big world, like us all. And let's do like a long word to make sure. Hippopotamus. Make sure long words fit. I think we want to give a little more space. And we're just going to center it by using that middle handle. Cool. So that is a word that will be magic word. Cool. So when a unit is created, we will get a random word and we will assign it to that unit. It'll display it there, and then when a word is typed, we'll iterate through all the units, find the one with the word on top, and destroy that. So let's head on over and say public void set word. Say private TMP, or I guess this one's a text mesh pro UG, think so? I always get the text mesh pro classes mixed up. We call it the magic word label, and we will say magic word label.text is equal to word. We also want to store the word. I think we can either store it on the unit itself, which maybe doesn't make sense, or we have some sort of dictionary mapping word to unit up here, which is I think what we want to do. And that'll work as long as the unit's word never changes, which it could be cool to have like a special unit whose word changes every 5 seconds or something, but the question is, do we want to code it a little bit differently for something that we might add in later? Probably not. So let's say configure our newly created unit here. We got our instance IDs printed out, so we know that it's looking good. We also want to assign a magic word to this unit. So here is where we will want probably some sort of like a separate word list database or something. I think what we'll do is we could do like a scriptable object that just contains our word list. But I think maybe we just do like a basic word list database. Let's drag him up here, reset the position to keep things nice and clean, and we'll just give it a script that our player controller can use. Maybe we'll also make it like a singleton so we can access it a little easier from everywhere. If I can remember the code. Public static that'll work, but I think I also want like turn instance, but also like a don't destroy on load or something. This is fine for now. We only have one scene anyway, so that'll be fine. But that'll let us over here, or over here, for example, we can say word list database WDB is equal to word list database.instance. And then we can use all these nice fancy functions over here. It's not a mono behavior. We'll say we'll add just a couple basic word lists. Up first, we'll say easy words, medium words, hard words, and that's good for now. We will give it a function that we'll probably just mock out and say this would use easy word list path. But for the sake of the demo, we're just going to say easy words. Let me close the window real fast. Someone is mowing the lawn. Alright, so just for demo purposes, we'll say easy words, a new list of apple, bottom, cat, dog, eat, free, geology. Not the words we'll use, but good enough for now. So that's our easy words list. We'll have the same for to-do, load other word lists. Actually, we can probably just what words will you give me? No, just wanted to see what words they thought were easy, medium, hard. Load other word lists. Cool, so here we can now say string random easy word is equal to that. Probably want to have a nice little public string random easy word, and these guys should all be private. Oops. Cool. So now we got a random easy word, and we can say unit dot get component that set word. We can now just go ahead and grab the unit controller of that and clean this up a little bit so we're not fetching it twice or more times when we add other stuff. We could also like instantiate everything in one constructor instead of using multiple functions. I think this is a little cleaner, but I think that's just preference. But now what we should see when we create a unit, it should have a random word assigned to it with each unit we create. It should be displayed properly on top of the unit, and it should also move with the unit because it's nested as a child under the unit. Let's give that a shot. Let's see if it all works as expected. If we press 1, what word do you have? It is just word. I don't think that's correct. Probably because you don't have a reference. And also extension of native class. I've never seen that before in my life. But yes, you do not have a reference to the word list database. This is not set. That's the important bit here, but let's take a look at our error as well. Well, it's gone. Let's say What do I need? Why does this happen? Left over in the library folder, you can delete them. This is specifically for this asset, I think. Find references in the scene. That's so weird. This guy, associated script cannot be loaded. Assign a valid script. Why is it invalid? Wordless database. Is it because of my hacky little singleton thing? It is not, probably. Game object, wordless database, references runtime script in a scene file. Missing a class attribute, extension of native class. Is it extending? Oh, because it's not a mono behavior, right. It is actually a mono behavior. So in that case, actually, we want to do our we can do our loading in a start function, which is kind of nice. Cool. My mistake there. Can now hop back over here, uncomment all this, get our instance helper back, which should work, hopefully. Let's say, let's print out the random easy word, make sure we're getting one, because this should return the one already in the scene, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so if we press 1, that says word. We still didn't set that reference. And we also didn't get our random word because this is actually invalid. Okay, so what we're going to do instead is just not do this. And we will just say public word list database, word list database. And we will set it manually, which is fine. I mean, doing it this way means we can also have like different word list databases for different players if we want. Like if one player chooses a race that's using Spanish word lists or something, we can do that, I guess. Cool, so that'll give us a word list database that we can use. So now we should get this label to now update, which, what is this? Not a UGI? What are you? Unit controller, TextMesh Pro. So just a TextMesh Pro when it's in the game world, I think. This guy goes here, cool. That link is now set. Now, when we create a unit, it should have cat geology. Stacked on word, but you know it's different. Bottom, cool, so it's working. So next steps are we destroy units when we type that word. We also want to have a little bit of a better camera here, probably looking down. I also see these units are still too low because apparently they're moving downwards for some reason. If I create a fresh one, he starts at 1 correctly. Does this guy have any gravity or anything? Is he colliding with the floor? If I... Oh, because we are just moving towards the enemy base, which is lower. So we actually want to zero out Y changes. We'll do that so they don't move downward toward the base, they just move in that direction. And we'll make our bases taller so it doesn't really matter, but that's the reason I think they were going down. I also want to add some quick colors in real fast because all this white is really hard to read on. So let's say materials. Let's create a green material for the ground, or brown or something. Doesn't super matter. We'll do like a dark green. Let's put that. Thought you could just put it on the ground. What do you want? Physics material? We can create a physics material. Ground. That's not what we want. How do you color a terrain? Do I have to paint on it in a certain color? You know, that'll work. Wait, that's just the... Oh, I'm painting a hole. We want to paint a texture. Paints a selected material layer. Okay, how do I select a material layer? Add layer. You know what, we don't actually need a terrain right now because nothing's colliding with anything. So, we'll just give our camera a nice background color instead. Skybox, you know, that's... We'll come back to that, but for now, give it a nice green. We will make our red material for the enemy. Which, that is actually the player, so that's why we have different colors. We'll say create blue. These are all just placeholders because we'll use actual models for everything, but now we can tell player base is blue. And let's give our unit maybe the material of the player base that created it. So our units will be blue, their units will be red. So that, where does the material live? We'll say assign material from this object's material to the unit and see if ChatGPT does it. That looks like it could work. I don't know. Never set materials from a script before. looks like it's working. Cool, so we do still need some billboarding on the text, so you can always read it when the camera's more top down. We want to be able to move the camera with WASD. Maybe we add that now. Because right now it's very not 3D. Let's go ahead and change our camera back to the skybox. And let's bring it up and over and down. 90 degrees, which I don't think is actually what we want, but let's put it there for now. That's interesting scaling. How do we want to do this? Let's add a script to the camera that lets us move it around with WASD. And we will say public float pan speed. And if Keycode dot, that's weird syntax. That ain't right. Get key down. Oh, right. Key. Wow. Brain blanked. What's that? Get key down. How did I use that before? Input.get key down. Is that right? Yeah. Down is just the frame that they start pressing it, so we want get key and WASD. That'll probably work. We'll test also holding multiple down at the same time. And we can also do like a, say, public float zoom max and public float zoom min, and maybe we do that on the scroll wheel. Why not? That seems fine. We will test it. I'm sure those numbers need adjusted, but maybe not. We should now be able to move around, and that is incorrect because W and S are panning on Y instead of Z. But scroll wheel does look like it actually works, so that's nice. Let's fix W and S. Let's also put these in the right order. So W, we want, I think it's vector 3 dot right, and down. I think so. We'll test it anyway. So W, okay, so W is the only one, and it is 90 degrees off. So that is actually up. That doesn't sound right. Doesn't sound right, but I think that's what we had before. W. Okay, it's working. So you can now move the camera around, check out the whole map. You can zoom in, zoom out. Let's increase the amount you can zoom out by like a lot. And let's see if we can fit the whole. Alright, so this guy. Okay, so that looks fine. We should increase the pan speed by how much you're zoomed, because when you zoom out a lot, it's really slow to pan. If you're zoomed in, it's a lot faster. So let's actually copy this, and I want to see if it'll incorporate the zoom at all. Space.world. Huh, never seen that either. But it's fine right now if it's a little slower to pan when you're zoomed out. Cool. So let's next do the billboard effect on the words. So they're all always facing the camera. And for that, we'll go over to our units. Let's add a script on the label itself. We'll say billboard. I wonder what the actual billboard renderer is. Let's take a look at that. It might do exactly what we want. Don't think it is. It's more for like a lower resolution when it's far away. Okay, so we'll just do it manually. Billboard. So here we'll say private camera to face. And probably makes sense to not always face the camera every update call, because if you haven't moved the camera, it's a bunch of unnecessary calls from all your billboards. But it's probably easier than setting up like a dirty state on needing to update all these billboards whenever you update the camera. So we can just go ahead and say rotate to face the camera, and that looks fine. We will test it, but that should, let's go ahead and let's put that on fixed update, which happens a lot less in the physics cycle. I think it's fine if we see a little bit of the edges. It's not perfectly smooth. Let's go ahead and test to make sure that works though. So that looks fine. It's still facing the camera even when we move. They still overlap a little bit, so maybe we'll do some like variance on the X position when they spawn. But we'll also, probably at this point, we want to add in destroying the units when you type their word. But let's quickly add in a little bit of, what axis is that? I think it is X. Or I guess it's going to be Z when you spawn. So let's say player controller. Since the spawn position is all temporary anyway, we'll say public vector3 spawn fuzziness. And we only want fuzziness on the x-axis, and we want of amount 1, which I think will bring it all the way out to here. This is at Z, so that'll bring it up to 10. 1 brings it out to like here. So let's do about 5, I think, or maybe let's do like 6. And that's on our that. So now when we spawn a unit, we can fuzzy up that position a little bit and say vector3 spawn position is equal to spawn position dot position. I think it had it there. Oh, right, because let's call this spawn focal point. Dot position plus the fuzziness, which X, Y, and Z. So it'll do 0 fuzziness on X and Y, but it will do -6 to 6 on the Z. We want to use that position as the new spawn position. And let's double check that that works, and then we'll get on to destroying units. So if we spawn a unit, we need to reset the reference because we renamed it. Click. And this guy doesn't even have the script yet. We will do the AI script after we get destroying units working. So here, we spawn a unit. They spawn in a little more variant spots. And as you see, they kind of also angle towards the enemy base. So they're going to combine a little more towards the end. I think what we can do is probably increase that variance by a lot, since they're still stacking a lot, but obviously you're not going to be spawning this many, probably, I don't know, whatever's fun. But this is working a lot better. I think we still want to zoom out a little more. So let's go to that camera, right, that reset, let's do 60 on that, so 3 times as much zooming out, and on the player base, let's amp that up to 10 difference. Let's just do a quick little play. Zoom all the way out. We can see the whole map now. Lots of little guys running towards the enemy base. We probably do want to figure out how to handle stacked units like that because, I mean, it can happen, and I'm not sure how you should be expected to type that. That's something we will think through afterwards. But let's go ahead and get destroying units working. I guess it could be like a strategy to save up a bunch of resources in order to spawn a bunch of guys all at once, but you probably do need to be able to read the text and not just like peel apart the little ones that you can read. It's probably more fun that way. Let's see what happens. If they get all the way to the base, they should stop moving. They might collide with it and just keep trying to move. Oh, it has no collision. So this seems fine. We'll set a distance that they can be at the target before they start attacking. And we'll add health bars to the bases and stuff like that. But we want to get let's get units being destroyed. So that happens in our player controller when we finish typing a word. What we actually need to do is have a reference to the enemy's units so we can loop through them. But in order to do that, we both need to create the enemy player controller and also add that reference to this guy, which will eventually become the enemies, but we'll do a simplified AI version for now. Let's say public dictionary of, that's exactly what we want actually. We do want to initialize it. Here, when we have a word, we .add for that word. So that causes a problem if 2 units have the same word. So we probably actually want to prevent that somehow, unless you get 2 units having the same word and you want to destroy them both, or you probably don't want to do one at a time, because if a player is looking at a specific unit and typing that word, and then another unit over here explodes, they might not realize that that one died and be like, why didn't my unit that I was targeting die? So I think you either want to prevent those duplicates or destroy all units with that word. And so maybe that's like a counter strategy to those strategies of spawning a bunch of little units. Maybe that means there's a lot more chance of overlap of having the same word. And so that kind of balances that out a little bit. We'll see. For now, we're just going to, I guess this will probably actually error. Let's say, do dictionaries error if you try to add a key that already exists. I think they do. So yeah, we can try to get a value. We could make the value a list of units. I think maybe what we'll do instead is just store a list of units and we'll iterate through them all instead of having the nice lookup time. Because that'll prevent our problems with duplicate keys. And should be fine as long as there's not tons and tons of units, which there probably won't be. So instead of this dictionary, we'll do a list of GameObject units. And we will say, we'll track this unit. So now basically when we handle a typed word here, we will iterate through the enemy's units and check if any of them have the word typed as their word. So let's add a accessor for this magic word that we are not storing. Maybe we just do a public string magic word. And we will say magic word is equal to word. So then we say we still need a reference to our enemy's units, but we'll say list unit. Actually, let's make this a list of unit controllers, so we don't have to fetch that every single time. That'll help a lot with our loops performance. We'll add the controller here, and we'll say just kind of a mocked up interface here. We have enemy units is equal to units. Because we don't want to store all of the game's units here, because we're trying to avoid having the beefy game manager script. We want to have this kind of scalable player controller script, which we will also have an AI player controller script for this demo, but theoretically, when this is multiplayer, you have multiple human player controller scripts, and each one handles their own spawning. Each one can see all of the units of their enemies, which we need to be able to get, which we probably will do by saying, let's see, at the start, we will say, I have an idea. Let's add script of a player controller, also a script of an AI player controller. We go to our enemy base for now. We add our AI player controller. We go edit this guy, which does nothing. We have our human player controller inherit from player controller. And player controller also inherits from player controller and does nothing for now. But in our human player controller now, we can say public list player controller enemy players. And so there, when the game loads, we can grab all of the player controller objects, which is the bases. We could search by tag, we could search by script. We could also have like a container, like look specifically in the battle area, or have an object that is just players or something like that. Let's say game object, I'll find game objects with tag base dot for each. This doesn't seem exactly what we want, but it's kind of the same logic of we want to grab all those base objects, we want to grab the player controller script on it, which hopefully would return the human player controller script and the AI player controller script. Guess we can potentially ask that. I'm still getting used to this Copilot thing, which doesn't seem to be as good as like GPT-4, or shout out to our AI sages in Discord. Which maybe I'll just do a little comparison there, but we'll say if I have a parent player controller script to child scripts inherit from it to child mono behavior will some object get component child player controller. Actually, so we'll take that, and we'll also Unity Sage ask the same thing. So this says should return the child scripts as well, which is what we would hope it would do. If you have a parent and two childs, it will return the child. Okay, and this says the same thing, should return the parent or any of its child scripts. It's just derived, that makes sense. If you need to differentiate between, you can use them specifically, yeah, it's the same thing. I feel confident that both are fine. So, how do we want to do this? We will say var enemy bases is equal to GameObject.find game objects with tag base, and then we want dot oops. what do we got here? So that's more what we wanted. We want the select and the where to filter out ourselves. Okay, so this will say grab all the game objects that are tagged base. Select those game objects for ones that have a player controller script component on it, which both human player controller and AI player controller inherit from, so it should give both. And then it should filter out or select ones where it has a different instance ID. So it should not select this one, it should select this one. And from the point of view of this player, it should not select themselves, but it should select this person. So that's how we'll find the enemies when you run the code from each player's point of view. Now let's clean this up just a tad. And what we really want is enemy players is equal to that. But obviously we have an enumerable. Let's see if we can get GPT to cast it for us. Where, and then we want like toList or something. Yeah. Cool. And I think the toList will also do a deep copy, so if we end up modifying this, I don't think it would ever like modify the actual objects, but that's nice. Just to be safe. Okay, so now we have our enemy players. What we can do is say for each enemy player, which is type player controller, we can iterate over each of their units and see which ones get destroyed. So for each that, yeah, found unit with word. This is magic word. Found unit with word. We will have it die. We don't need to do any of this. Scores obviously will come later. Let's add our die function. We could have them take damage, but I mean, they'll take damage from other enemies, so we might as well add that in real fast with proper format. But that's not what we want here. We want to just straight up kill them when the player types their word. And so that will explode like spawn an explosion and destroy the game object. Cool. So in our player controller, we can now theoretically type a word. When that is typed, we go through all enemy players and all units of that enemy player, check to see if that unit has the word we typed. If it does, we destroy the unit. We could add things like if you didn't find any units, there could be a penalty. I don't think we need to do that. I think we want to do like bonuses for like streaks and like no mistakes, stuff like that. So this should be good. This should write, because our units actually needs to come up to the base player class. All players have units, whether they're controlled by a human or an AI. Humans have the input box. All players have spawnable units. All players have a spawn point, but not for long. Let's pull it up anyway. Because we're gonna do the AI controller next, so we'll need these as well. Humans have the input field. All players have a word list database. I want to make sure that these are persisting over to the editor. But let's make sure... Right, gotta save that. Let's make sure we still have... And we don't... Oh, okay, there's our word list database. Okay. Why... I don't think that that is true. Okay, it's not. And all players have enemy players as well. And we can clean all this up later too. We can add common functions and stuff. But for the human player, obviously we want this specifically for toggling text input manually. We want this specifically for letting a human spawn units. The AI will obviously have different logic for spawning units and also destroying units. So I think all of this is fine to stay in the human player controller. So we can't really test this because it is only getting our enemy players' units. But what we can do for funsies to test it is just say enemy players dot add self, or this. So we treat ourself as an enemy. So now when we type a word, we should look at our own units, check if any of them have the magic word, and destroy that unit. So let's double check that that works, and then we'll remove that. But if we spawn a unit, we should be able to hit enter, type in free, destroys a unit. Cool. Hit enter, type in... Why is the base moving? Oh, it's the camera moving. Okay. So we actually want to make sure the camera doesn't move when the input field is open. And to avoid, well, let me step back. What we tested worked. We are able to create a unit, type in the word, and it's destroyed. If we type in something else, it's not destroyed. We typo it, not destroyed, and so on. Cool. Let's quickly remove this, which treated ourself as an enemy, just for testing that. And now let's look at how do we keep the camera from moving when we're typing text. So the easy solution is to just have a reference to the human player controller from the camera, check if text box is open, and don't do the movement if that's true. But I think what we want to do, just for reducing that coupling between scripts, maybe we can lock the position of the camera in the player controller script And then this can continue to fire as if it's unlocked, but the camera just doesn't move. I don't know if that's a bad thing to do or not. But we'll see if it even works. So, if we're typing, or if we're opening the input field, if we say camera.main dot, let's say, let's get a little help here. Lock the camera's position. Dot enabled false. I don't know that that is what we want. It's not setting it inactive, but I think enabled would be like, what happens here? We're gonna find out. We also want to do the opposite. Unlock the camera's position. Let's give it a shot. Let's see what happens. So if we can move the camera. If we hit enter, if we hit W, okay, it just works. What does our camera look like? Have an enabled flag or something? That's checked. It's on the camera controller. Oh, okay. It just disables the whole script for movement. I mean, that makes sense. And then when we hit enter again, it re-enables it. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's fine. It's a little unexpected. I feel like the camera controller needs a better name of like camera movement or something, so it's more obvious that we're disabling the movement specifically. I could see how we could add some stuff in the camera controller that we wouldn't want to disable, like following units or something like that. So we will keep this. We are going to rename that camera controller. Let's just say camera movement. Player controlled camera movement. And wow, I didn't expect that to rename the file as well. That is nice. Alright, so player controlled camera movement now gets disabled and enabled. That makes way more sense. We're getting that component. Let's go ahead and grab our main camera at the start so we don't have to fetch it every time. And we'll use that instead. It's probably not a big performance difference, but if you're unfamiliar, camera.main is shorthand for like, go look at all the cameras, find the one that is tagged as main camera, I think with a label, yeah, or a tag, versus having like a main one set somewhere in this variable maybe. So it's a little better to set it somewhere so you can always access it without that lookup, but it's not a big difference. So that should all work. Let's do one final quick test. We shouldn't be able to delete our own units now because we're not an enemy. But if we create a bunch of units, they will now run towards the enemy. If we were to, say, increase their speeds, give them other stats, like they would all just work, so we can create some prefabs for different units that way. But I think what's next is this AI that we'll be up against. And the code is structured in a way where we can theoretically like have this guy as well, and it should just work. He'd find a near enemy to attack, he'd find a near enemy to attack. We could also have multiple player bases with some networking code where this guy's client, his camera follows him, his input spawns his units, etc. And he just treats all three of these guys as enemies. Same with this guy, treating all three of these guys as enemies, and so on. But we just want to make sure the code's structured to enable that. We don't want to code that quite yet. Lots of fussy network code to be done. But we will go ahead and code a AI player that will spawn units randomly, that'll run towards us, and every so often he'll destroy a random unit, I guess, or something like that, just so we can get a game going. We can spawn our own units, we can test out the inputs, see how it feels. So let's go ahead and give him a spawnable unit. Let's give him a focal point, fuzziness of 10. Let's give him a wordless database as well. His enemy players will be set to us. Let me move this off my screen. And let's jump into AI player controllers code. So we'll put this guy over here. So basically, we'll have our start where we'll get our enemy players. Actually, I think it was trying to auto-complete that. Awesome, perfect. Does it need link or something? Yeah, needs link. And then in our update function, we will create a random unit every n seconds and destroy a random enemy unit every n seconds. So 2 different timers. We can scale the cooldown on destroying units based on whether it was easy, medium, or hard, something like that. But for now, we just want them to spawn units to come at us. We can destroy them, and we want them to destroy our units that we're sending at them, just so we don't instantly win. So let's do some difficulty configuration for our AI. We'll say public float spawn interval 5 seconds and a destroy interval. We'll say public float spawn cooldown. How much time is left until they spawn the next one. Same with that. Let's see what else this wants. I guess we could put that in awake. That's fine, I think. Does it want any other variables? I do sometimes conflate like awake and start. I feel like I should start using awake more for like setting up the references, and start for more like stuff that's supposed to happen on the first frame. But I know there's a lot more intricacies between them. Just awake happens beforehand. So it happens before start methods. Stuff that needs to happen before the start. Sets up references or initializes variables, one-time setup tasks. Start is used for initialization that needs to happen once the game has started, rather than before the game has started. So it's still like a one-time setup, but it's after awake. I guess, yeah, coroutines, interacting with other objects probably. So maybe this find game objects with tag should go back in start. I don't know if other objects are like ready in awake, but I'll look into that more. We'll keep it in start for now, just because I know it's available at that point. But we will go ahead and say, let's create a random unit every so often. If our cooldown is ready, we reset our cooldown. We spawn a unit at our focal point plus our fuzziness. Our unit is a random unit. Let's go ahead and clean that up a little bit. Let's say unit template there. We might adjust like the stats on that unit before spawning it, but now we spawn that unit at that position, that rotation. Don't need to set the owner on it, but let's say unit controller is equal to unit get component. This guy becomes controller, and we want to assign like the material that we were doing. So it's a nice red color, or whatever color the player chooses, I guess. We want to find the nearest enemy base. Which should, like the other one, it should find both bases and then find the first one that is not this base. So it's not based on distance, which would make more sense in like a 4-person map, but with 1v1 it's always going to be the other player. We set the target on that unit to the enemy base. We still need to assign a magic word to that unit. I feel like all this maybe should go into the unit initializer now, just because we're duplicating this code twice. So let's make sure this works, and then maybe we can clean that up a little bit. And lastly, we will add the unit to our list of units, so the player over here can access it when typing words. But that should be all we need for spawning units. Let's go test that and see if they spawn some units at us. Actually, before we do that, I want the spawn interval to be a little faster, and let's double check the spawn point. That looks fine. So it's running to its own base, which is not quite right. Debug.log our instance ID So this is what I was wondering before, if like instance ID might be just different every time. Because if this enemy is the first element in the list here, it would work when we do it over here, because obviously this instance ID will be different every time and it'll just get the first element. But now that we're doing it from the enemy's point of view, if it's first and the instance IDs don't actually match up, it's just going to return itself. So what we want to do is probably take this and say that one's get instance ID, and just make sure that these are different, because they should actually be the same here if we are first, which is what it looks like is happening if they're running to our own base. So let's see here. Yeah. Wonder if it's the instance ID of like the script versus the game object. So if we were to do this .game object .get instance ID, I bet that is more what we want. So let's do the same here for this dot game object. Let's make sure they're both game objects. So this one should be as well. Let's run that and see. It should be running to the blue base. Okay, so yeah, it was, the script has a different instance ID than the object itself, which makes sense. But now, as the player, we got all these guys running at us. We should be able to say cat, kill all the cats, and kill all the dogs. So we do have a bug of once this, what's probably happening is we're not cleaning up the list of units. So we have this list of units. One of them was a unit with the word dog. We destroyed that unit from the perspective of that unit, but we didn't remove that unit from the list. So now when we type in dog again, we are obviously trying to destroy it again, but it's already been destroyed. So what needs to happen is, when a unit gets destroyed, we need to remove it from that units list. And I'm not sure we want, can you change? Let's ask this. Can you modify an array during a for each? I feel like you should get an error if this happens. Designed to, right. So we'll just switch it over to a for loop. And then that'll give us the index of what unit to destroy as well. So instead of this, we'll say for int I is equal to 0, I is less than, enemy player.units.count. That's our units. This is our die. We want to remove the unit from the units array, which removes that, and we also want to decrement our I because there will be a new unit at the current position. Pretty sure we need to, because if we're at like I is equal to 3, that unit gets destroyed. We have proof. So we have 5 units here. We iterate over this guy, this guy. This guy matches our word. We remove at I equals 2. Now we want to redo this loop at I equals 2 because we have a new unit there. So we'll do that for now. So that should fix that bug. We're now, should all be good. And these debugs worked out. Let's take them out. Let's go give that a try again. See if we can delete or destroy some units and then destroy new units that have the same name. So dog 3. Give me another dog, maybe cat. Alright, so if we type cat here, it should destroy the new cat if we fixed the bug. Otherwise it'll error. Cool. 3 was another one. Eat, bottom. Cool. So, kind of want to just get the feel of things. Okay. So that's probably good for like medium to hard. Or maybe like a hard mode if we did like 2.5 times that speed. See how that feels. I mean, that's fine. I think at that point we want to be increasing the unit speed. So we probably don't want to go more than like 2 words a second. Because they kind of just bunch up a lot. But if we were to increase the unit speed by a lot, say like 2.5, that's probably how we want to scale the difficulty. If we jump in here, yeah, that feels a lot better. Yeah, so we got kind of 2 levers that we can use for scaling difficulty over time. And we'll probably use both of those for balancing like the different units that you can buy. So maybe faster or stronger units, or yeah, I guess the spawn rate isn't really going to come into play when you're a player because you're going to spawn stuff manually, but the speed of the units can dictate difficulty. So your more expensive units will probably go faster and have harder words versus cheaper units that will go slower and have smaller words. Cool, so that all works. Let me just feel it out a little bit more. Just obviously we want some like explosions when you destroy a unit. We want sound effects, we want particle effects, all that jazz, but I think the key aspect of making sure that it just feels good as a typing game is getting real close to being there. It'd be kind of nice if, I guess I should move my camera over here, zoom out a little bit. This is more the view that the player would see. Probably shouldn't be looking at the actual scene view, but the text box kind of blends in a little bit with the text, so maybe we address that a little bit, but it does feel nice to like explode big groups of units. There's probably some strategy there of like letting specific words build up. You have some like strategy in whether you prioritize stuff that's almost to you versus just spawning, or like when you have your own units that are running towards them. Maybe if we go back to that rock, paper, scissors pattern we were looking at earlier, if all of your guys are rock type and you have a bunch of paper and scissors coming up, you probably want to prioritize typing the words of the paper ones so your rock guys can get in and kill the scissors guys. But right now they obviously just go to the enemy base, nobody attacks anything, but we have the basic system for clearing out units by typing their magic word. And it feels pretty fine. I think these guys obviously should speed up a little bit, but we're going to have a bigger like map to work with, so we'll speed them up when we get the bigger map. This is nice for testing. Very cool. So it's working well. Things that we should do next. We still need to add attacking for units, both attacking bases and attacking each other. We want to add a few different kinds of units, which we'll probably do a little bit later. We want to add health to your base, so there's actually like something happens when the enemy units attack you. And oh right, we weren't even done with the AI. We want to make sure that they're destroying random units as well. So you don't instantly win by just spawning a single unit and it goes and destroys other units. So rather than destroying their own units, which would be silly, they should destroy enemy players' units. A random unit from an enemy player. Let's say that. So we'll say if the cooldown for destroying a unit is ready to fire again, we'll say for each. If that player has any units, we will grab a random unit and destroy it. And I think that'll work fine. And we don't necessarily need to break, we'll just destroy one from every player. And that should be fine. So now, when we play, if we spawn a unit, it should destroy it. So we got 2 here. About 5 seconds went by. Next one should probably destroy. I guess it picks a random one every time. So we got 3 here. We'll balance this on speed, so like once we have a better sense of how fast you're able to spawn units and how fast those units go, that's about how often the player or the enemy will destroy a unit or not. Cool. And then just to jump back to our list of what to do next, we also want some sort of like resource system for limiting how many units you can spawn, how often you can spawn them, how many at one time, and so on. But things are looking good. I'm gonna take a quick bathroom break, and then we will get back to it and probably add attacking on units, I guess. That makes sense to do next, so we can get kind of the full experience. But if you'll give me just 1 minute, I will be right back. Alrighty, we're back. Thanks for sticking with me. We are going to get into coding attacking on the units. We've got our two bases. They can each spawn units. They can each destroy each other's units. Units just march towards the enemy. The two aspects to attacking are, the most important one is that they attack the enemy base. So we'll add some health bars to those as well, but they should probably also attack the enemy units. I think that makes a lot of sense. So we're going to start with attacking the enemy bases, and once that's done, we will attack enemy units as well. I know we are now 2 hours into the stream. It's normally 2 hours long, but I think we can keep going a little while longer and get this all wrapped up. I want to get it to a good playable state, so I can share it on the Discord or whatever and put it on itch so y'all can play it, but I want to get into the models and the graphics and the visual effects and stuff too, so I think once I have this actual logic down, it'll be way more fun to polish it up and make it look cool, turn it into a real typing game that feels good. But obviously we got to do all this core stuff first, make sure the game feels good to play, make sure it runs, works, you know how it is. Let's go ahead and let's get this attacking working. So we've got units, and those units have words on them that can cause them to be destroyed. However, they also have attack ranges, attack damage, attack cooldowns, and health. So first of all, I think what we want to do is let's run over to that unit controller. Let's draw a little gizmo for their attack range. I think that'll be nice for us to visualize while we're building a couple different units. Can't remember the on draw gizmos. Let's draw the attack range. Let's see what we get here. We get our wire sphere, which should be fine in 3D. That should be enough. And that's about what I expected for melee unit. Maybe we go ahead and give him a slightly larger attack range. And let's say they defaults to 10 health too. So things to think about. We could do like a cone attack range, which might make more sense for like more long range things. If a unit somehow sneaks behind a unit, it doesn't really make a lot of sense for them to be attacking stuff behind it. But I think until we have those sort of specialized units, I think it just makes a lot of sense to do the simple circle around it. If there's any enemies nearby, pick one, I guess. We could give like splash damage, we can give cleave, we can give whatever we want effects, but for the most basic unit, we will just see if there's any enemy units within that unit circle, and if there is, we will pick one and deal damage to it. So what we want to do is let's add a tag for unit. Let's give that tag to the unit, and we also want to probably store the player that owns this unit on the actual unit, so when we're looking in that circle, we aren't finding like that unit's allies. So let's add that in real fast. Let's say public player controller owner, and we will set that when we create our units. You see that we're adding units twice here, which we should not do. So let's fix that real fast. Make sure the rest of it looks fine. Yeah. But here, AI player controller and human player controller, neither of them have a reference to their own player controller. They just have the enemies. So let's go ahead and we'll add that in as well. So, wait, they are their own player controller. So that makes things super easy. We will say controller.owner is equal to this. Easy peas. Controller.owner is equal to this. Cool. So now in our unit controller, we can go ahead and say let's first let's pull this out of the update and just say move towards target. Let's clean this up real fast before we add more to the update. And we want to have a public bool attackable enemies nearby. Return false. And what we want to do is, if there are attackable enemies nearby, we stop and attack them. Otherwise, then we move towards the target. I'm gonna complete this attack real fast. We'll come back to it, but we'll call it attack enemy. But we want to add this logic real fast to if attackable enemies nearby, then attack enemy. And we could have that like return the attackable enemies, because I think we're gonna use this logic here to determine if there are attackable enemies, but we'll add that if we need it. So here, then we want to move towards the target if there are no attackable enemies nearby. Cool. So let's go ahead and write this. Attackable enemies nearby is all game objects with a unit tag that are in this physics sphere. This will get all the colliders in that sphere in our attack range. Attackable enemies if the owner is different. Okay, that seems fine. There's no other conditions that would make them attackable or not, I guess. When they're dead, we just destroy them, so we don't need to worry about attacking dead bodies. So I think what we can do is, let's say this is a list of unit controllers that it'll return. Say list of unit controller nearby enemies. Let's say if nearby enemies count is greater than 0. And maybe we even just pass an enemy there. Just do this. We'll say to do play attack animation, but for now we'll just say attacking. I guess we'll do better logging than that. We'll say GameObject.name attacking. That'll work. So that enemy will take our damage. So we need to choose an enemy, which we will just say nearby enemies first. We could just shuffle it and pick the first one, or like sort them by distance and pick the first one, or the real approach is probably to rank them by like threat score and pick the highest threat score, but we don't need to do that quite yet. I think we can just say, give me all of the attackable enemies nearby. If there are any, attack the first one, otherwise we move towards the target. So this should now, we'll walk through the logic real fast, but this should all work. We spawn a bunch of units, they spawn a bunch of units, all the units walk towards their target. If they come across any enemies of a different owner, so when they get to that middle collision, they return the attackable enemy, which then has them attack that unit instead of keep moving. When they attack that unit, we get some debug. That unit takes damage, which reduces the health by the damage amount, and then kills them when their health is 0. So the piece we're missing here is a cooldown on attacking, because otherwise they will just attack that unit every frame. So what we want to use is our attack cooldown timer and say if our attack cooldown timer is less than 0, then we will attack the enemy. Otherwise we just want to like wait around. Don't move, don't attack, wait for the timer. So that means units should now attack like every second. They'll do 1 damage every second. It'll be 10 seconds before units start dying. I think that's fine for now for like testing. We'll be able to see the health go down in the inspector. When the health gets to 0, we will not destroy. We want to go ahead and use our nice die function. So that should handle attacking other units. I said I would attack enemy bases first, but this seemed fine. Let's rename this to attackable enemy units nearby, because we'll probably just do the exact same thing for attackable enemy buildings nearby, but we might give units and buildings some sort of parent class that lets us just stick them in the same list. Let's give this a shot. If we go into the game, we spawn some units. Let's watch some of their healths. See this guy? He's got a health of 10. Surely he'll both attack and be attacked pretty soon. So health over here. Health 9, 8. Okay, so these guys are both attacking him, so his health's going down faster. We do get a lot of like overlap in the text, which not the greatest. But you know, it's fine for now. They do stop correctly when they're close enough to attack, so when we get proper models in, they'll have like sword swinging. For archers that have longer attacks, we can do the archer animation and spawn a projectile and just kind of do that visually, but we don't necessarily need to move like damage onto the projectile. So they're breaking through, they get to our base. They're not going to attack it quite yet, but they get there and they'll probably just stop on top. Yeah, because we don't have a collider on the base, I guess. Or maybe it's too low. No, it should be fine. We do get a few errors occasionally because we're destroying objects that have already been destroyed, which makes me think when the AI is, or when a unit destroys another unit in combat, it's not being removed from that player controller's units list. And then when that player controller destroys a unit by typing its word, it's already destroyed. It's trying to call destroy again. So that makes sense. So what we need to do in the die function is remove this unit from the owner's list of units. Exactly. Okay, so that means we no longer have to do that in the places we were doing it, which makes this code a little less intuitive if you don't see like why we're decrementing the eye. So we'll just add since die removes. But I think that's nicer because it's a single interface of anytime a unit dies, we don't need to worry about cleaning up the list. We know that the unit will clean itself up. Alrighty. So, I guess we can close this. Next up, we want to get maybe health bars showing on both units and buildings. And we want to attack the buildings. So I think what I'll do with health bars is get a fancy asset for health bars. And so to avoid coding up a health bar that like changes size and scales the green over the red and all that I will immediately replace, I'm going to go ahead and just add another text billboard on each unit for a health display. And we will display the unit's health there. And we'll just use that for now to visualize the health, because we'll get StarCraft style health bars in a minute, or after the stream when I work more on visuals. But font size, let's scale this bad boy down quite a bit. Let's put him maybe over here. So when he billboards, he's above the word. And we will add that billboard script that we made just so it always faces the camera. And let's go ahead and center that as well. Cool, that should be fine. So now on the unit controller, we just want to have a reference for that health display and then update it both in start and in take damage. Those are the two times that the health would change. We don't need to necessarily be setting the health every update tick we can just set it whenever it changes. So in start, we will do that. And we could have like health remaining, current health. We don't necessarily need that quite yet because there's no units that can like heal other units, so health is health, there's no caps. They always go down, so that seems fine. And then take damage. We will do that. We do want to clamp it just to 0 as a minimum, so we don't display a -1 as it's dying. Should only be for like less than a frame or a frame, but we'll at least say health is equal to mathf dot max, and then we display that in the new text. So that should be fine. If we play now, everything should now have health. Probably. It overlaps even more with the text, but seems fine. Let's make sure we get a bunch to make it to the center, and we'll see that health drop as units start fighting. So about now, hopefully. Right, we never set the reference. So back to the unit. This health display needs to go here. Let's try that one more time. Spawn a whole bunch of units so they can get to that center fast and overwhelm our lowly little AI lad. I might add middle click panning on the camera just because it's what I'm used to in StarCraft instead of WASD, but I feel like in the game you start using keyboard way more. Alright, so health is going down. We have a whole ton of people stacked up, so it's taking down their health nice, so there's some strategy emerging there of like stacking your dudes up, both for making it harder to type, which we still need to figure out what we expect the player to do in that situation, or if that can be a valid strategy, and also for like damaging units a lot faster if they have low attack cooldowns. And also, we could give them a longer attack, like, aggro range, because they have their attack range of what's valid to attack, but they are just running by all these other people. We could have them say, like, a larger circle if there are enemy units within that circle to set them as the new target, run to them and attack them, and then go back to their original target. I think that might be nice to add. We have health working now. We still need to get attacking bases working, which I know is like the whole point of the game, but we're doing some fun stuff in the meantime. Let's go ahead and say let's give a public float aggro range of 3. Let's draw that. In yellow is perfect. And then down here we can say if there are no nearby enemies, we should probably call that attackable enemies. So if there's no attackable enemies, we can also say look for nearby enemies. And I'm looking at this function thinking we can just pass a distance and reuse it. So we'll say float distance. We use that distance. instead of the attack range, we say attack range here, and we say list unit controller nearby enemies is equal to aggro range. So now we can say if there are nearby enemies, then we can run towards them, and if there's not, we can run towards the enemy base. So this function also, I think we should pass in our actual target that we want to move towards. So let's say game object target. So this guy now gets target. Don't need enemy base anywhere. Let's call this direction to target. And move towards target, enemy base, makes sense. And then we will move towards target, nearby enemies. Cool. So logically now, a unit first looks to see if there's any units within its attack range that are enemies. If there are, it tries to attack them. It's on a cooldown, so it'll attack, wait around, attack, wait around, and so on. When there are no longer any attackable units, it'll then look at a slightly larger aggro range, and if there are any enemies within that range, it'll run towards them until they are in attack range. Otherwise, they will move towards the enemy base. So I've written enough game AI to know already that there's a nice little edge case here of if the enemy has units that ignore you and always run towards the enemy base, unless you're faster than them, you will always chase them all the way back to your base. Or I guess unless you're also slower, significantly slower than them, because what'll happen is you're coming from the side, they'll pass you, they won't aggro onto you, and you will loop around and follow them all the way back. That seems fine. Maybe we can get a unit that just goes straight to the enemy base for that kind of strategy. Because obviously the counterplay is just spawn units that are significantly faster or slower than that unit. So you have a lot of options there. It's not like a specific counter. But there could be a strategy of just spawning a bunch of guys that run directly at your base, and you need to make sure that you are prepared to deal with that. But this should now handle our aggro range on units. Let's go ahead and jump into a demo, make sure that that all works properly. What we should see now is if we spawn a whole bunch of dudes, their aggro ranges are pretty small actually, so we'll probably want to increase those. But what we should see when they get to the center is rather than running past the units that they've killed and ignoring these ones on the side, they should start moving towards the ones on the side and kind of clean them up. Maybe we didn't spawn... Well, you can see that these guys are actually moving towards these enemy units that they want to fight. So it's a lot less of kill a guy and then run past towards the enemy base and more acting more cohesive in like a swarm or a squad or something like that. So I think that works a lot better. And then there's a lot more stacking, which we probably want to do some smart, like if there's multiple words within the same radius, maybe collapse them into like one slightly larger word, or like a word in a slightly different color. That'll at least cut down a lot on the kind of just this gibberish here. but we probably want some other strategies of how to deal with that as well. Not sure yet exactly. Hey, Professor Stevens, glad to have you here. I'm kind of prototyping just a little fun little demo based on an old StarCraft custom map. If you're familiar with Nexus Word Wars, let me restart it. But the gist is basically you get as many players as you want. We have an AI player here just because I don't want to deal with the networking on stream. But you have a couple players. Maybe you add a second player base, throw it over here, and so on. But you can spawn units that go and attack your enemies. Enemies can spawn units that come and attack you. We haven't built more than one unit yet. We've got all the stats ready to go, but we're just using a generic unit. But the gist is, it's a typing game, so as your enemy is spawning units, obviously your units can attack them normally, but you can also, as a player, go ahead and clear stuff out. And the funness, I'd say, comes from when you're against other human players who are doing the same to you. You gotta balance. You have key shortcuts for generating units, but you also need to keep typing to destroy their units as well. So pretty simple game, but I think it'll be fun. I'm just doing kind of the blocky basics right now to get it all working, and then I'll throw in some real models and animations and sound effects and graphics and all that. But I'm kind of digging it so far. I think there will be some fun strategy of once you get different units, you can target like which specific enemy units you want to destroy, like the units that are good against your units, or if you spawn a bunch, if you think of it as like rock, paper, scissors, you spawn a bunch of rock guys, you're going to want to target their paper guys so your rock guys can get through and destroy their scissors guys or whatever. But really leaning into the typing game vibe, so I hope it kind of comes through. In this game, actually, we're not using a lot of, well, we are going to build out some basic, like, traditional AI logic in controlling the enemies, like what units they spawn and how often they spawn them, how they can use their resources and stuff like that. But in a lot of our demos, other demos that we do, I stream every Tuesday, by the way, usually on a new project or continuing one of the other stream projects. We do a lot more work with generative AI and like text generation, image generation. The game that we've been doing on most of our streams is called You Are Not Alice, where you play as a hacker who's infiltrated in a company's network. And so you take over an employee's computer and you can type to their coworkers and have conversations with them. And the goal of the game is to convince them to run a virus file that you can send them, so you can then access their computer and talk to their coworkers and so on. So most of the time we're doing a lot more work in AI. This week I wanted to have kind of a fun week of building a game that I would just enjoy playing, and we can experiment with different ways to add AI into it. Yeah, it's a little bit of a horror story. I can go ahead and show it off real fast. Let me see if I've got a window here. You can actually play it yourself at in your browser for free. If you want to jump over to our itch page, it's called You Are Not Alice. We also have a little retro brawler that we built with some AI conversations. It was kind of the precursor to this, where you brawl in the street sort of like Nintendo style, and then after a certain amount of time, cops show up and you have to like conversationally convince them that you're innocent in order to keep brawling. So it's a fun little project. We built it for a game jam in a week, so it's pretty simple. It's a really tight game loop. But You Are Not Alice was kind of what we wanted to expand upon and build out a much larger world that you can play in. I'll show this off real fast. But in this game, it's very sandboxy, so there's no goals that I've coded in quite yet. I've got some fun ideas. Maybe next week's stream, I'll work on some of those. I don't know how familiar you are with AI and kind of the technologies around it, but I'm looking into using vector databases and vector comparison for comparing messages. So if you have a goal in the game of like, get this employee a raise or get this employee fired, it's really hard to take random text and say, hey, does this message that you got from their boss, does it complete this goal? But I have some fun things that I think might work for, like, if you take a bunch of messages that would complete that goal, you can reduce them down to vectors. And then you can do like a distance comparison from those vectors to the actual message that they received in game and see how close they are to the goal. And I think that might work for kind of classifying the goals. We'll find out next week, though. Most of your AI has been based on pathfinding and simulated human behavior. I love simulation games and really just simulations in general. So have you worked on anything cool that you want to share? I've done some pathfinding. I used to do a lot of like game competitions where you coded the client for a game. So that's where a lot of my pathfinding came from, and a lot of my simulations past has been just coding up little demos. But I am lucky enough that I've been able to work a lot more with kind of the new generative AI tech, and my friend Andrew and I started this studio where we're kind of exploring new ways that you can use these kind of new AI tools in games. And so this is kind of one example of that, where you have this virus.exe file on a file system and you want to basically take control of this person's computer. You've got their applications. It's still very rough. You got all their files, which is actually all generated with AI at the beginning of the game. So every time you play, it'll have slightly different files. Obviously, you have this virus.exe file that you're sharing with other people. Each employee has personalities and their job role and their bosses and this whole complex network of employees. So it'll generate files that make sense for their personality and role. So this person specifically like has a lot of memory problems. So you see a lot of files that are like passwords I always forget and tasks I'm pretty sure I finished and so on. And under the hood, the AI just generates the file system itself. But when you click on a file, it'll generate the contents of that file as well. And you can browse through and see like thoughts on Bob, thoughts on Carol. You can read those files once they're generated. You can open up a chat with your coworkers. If I open up a chat with Bob, I can read this conversation is like also generated every time you play, so it's going to be slightly different every time, but it's based on their personalities and their roles. So she's going to be asking him for help, and so you can kind of jump in and say like, hey, thanks for the help, like I have this file that I can't seem to get running, can you run it and try? And then you drag in the virus file. A fun little thing as well is if you generate a file like your thoughts on Bob, you can drag that in and it'll send the file and also the contents so he can respond to that. This specifically, this game wasn't for the jam, it's actually the brawler. I can show that off too as well, but let me just jump over to Carol, who's a very, very easy mark, and say, hey, thanks. Oh, can I have this? So if I send that message and a little primer for that file we're about to send her over the virus. You can kind of hear an audio cue I added kind of for debug, but that thunder in the background meant she ran the file, and now what's happening is we're generating her whole file system, all of her contacts, all of her existing conversations, her relationship scores with those contacts, and so on. And in just a second, we'll get a little balloon saying that we've infected her and now have access to her computer. And so the game loop basically has you progress through this company. You've got all these employees. You want to infect them all. They each have different relationships with each other. Now that we've infected Carol, you can jump over to Carol's computer. She has her own files, her own contacts, and so on. So that's kind of where we've gone from our Game Jam submission. I'll show you the Game Jam, which is much, much simpler and a lot more buggy. I've been working on You Are Not Alice on stream for about a month now. So this guy's a little louder. Hope he's not too loud. But it's more simple retro vibes. You just jump in and beat people up. Eventually the cops come. The theme of the jam for this was copycat. And so the twist that we have on this sort of retro brawler is eventually you will see clones of yourself that show up and start beating other people up. So this guy down here, he beats people up as well, and you get blamed for it. So what you want to do is beat him up as well to keep him from beating up other people. And then after some amount of time, the cops will show up and you'll see like a more conversational interface, which is the AI aspect that we added in. And what we found was people really liked lying to the cops. Big surprise. So they came up with a bunch of crazy stories and like reasons they would be out beating people up legitimately. I'm gonna turn this audio down a little bit. It's a little loud for me. But all of the artwork was actually also generated with AI. I do a little art myself, but not nearly good enough to throw something together in time for a jam. We wanted to get some basic like concept art for everything. Actually, that's not entirely true. The sprites for the characters that punch and kick are an asset. I'll show you the credits in a second. But you can kind of see the flow here of the AI conversation aspect that we added in. There's like a heat bar of how much they trust you or not. If you get it above this line, they take you to jail. If you get it below this line, they let you go and you can keep going to the next level. I'm not doing great here because I wasn't even reading the conversations. But if we just kind of keep them going, he didn't believe us at all. So you get a little score for how many people you beat up, how many wallets you stole. I'll show you the... all this was AI generated, but the sprites are by these guys, which are on the Unity Asset Store. They're all free. And we have sound as well. But that was our initial like foray into chat-based AI, and people liked that. So that's why we ended up making You Are Not Alice, to kind of expand the scope a lot. You have a whole company worth of people to talk to. And it's a lot less black and white of do you fail the entire game or do you get to go. Your link actually got censored by Discord. I don't know if you can send links in the chat, but if you want to give me something I can search for, I can pull it up on stream, or if you want to, you can join our Discord and share the link in there. It's a Discord that we're building for game developers and people interested in AI, so you might fit in. We've only got a few people in so far, but I'm happy to take a look at what you got. I always love checking out what people are doing with AI. There we go, that works. Let's see what we got here. Where did my chat go? I trust you. Would a professor steer me wrong? Let's see what we got here. My first, please be kind. I like it. Is there details on the controls? I like this this loading in animation. Trying WASD, maybe. I see. I clicked the pipe. And do I need to switch to the next level? Oh, I see. I unlocked level 2. Okay. I love. Oh, I see. Okay, cool. I dig this. I can see how. Did you use pathfinding for this? Like, just a search to see if you complete from A to B? It's a really clever use of pathfinding, if so. Yeah, it tests your solution on each move. That's clever. I never considered, like, I've played these games, especially on like 90s computers, where this was like you go buy a CD and it's a game like this and it's amazing. But I never considered how they would store whether the solution is correct, especially on levels where there's multiple solutions. Like, I would have guessed like a matrix of positions and have list of correct solutions, but I think having just like pathfinding from A to B and switching around those vertexes of neighbors, that's a really clever way to do it. This is getting a lot more complex very quickly. I like it. Also, good sound effects. Good sound effects. I do wish that I could rotate things the other direction. Or maybe rotate multiple things at a time. But it's good. Oh yeah, I missed your comment about Streets of Rage. That's actually the inspiration of that game, yeah. And the asset pack that we did for the sprites was called, like, I think Unity of Rage or something like that, so it's definitely inspired. Are there lots of different solutions on these stages, by the way? Or is it more like one or two solutions, would you say? I know it gets hard to test them all when it's so many combinations. Let's see here. Did you consider generating these levels at all, or I assume they're all handcrafted because it's a static amount of levels. But since you have the logic to test if there is a solution, it seems like you might be able to, at least in the editor, like generate a few and test them yourself and then like approve them if you didn't want to leave it up to generation at runtime. But it might be a good way to get like a lot more levels really quickly and be able to go in afterwards and modify them a little bit to make each one a little bit more different. But I'd say this is solid. You said this was your first AI work or your first? Oh, no AI, but you wrote this one a long time ago. No, this was my first days with Unity, maybe 2017. I was just trying to prove I could write a game, but your suggestion is quite practical. Yeah, this is I would say very well polished first game. There's a lot of people who don't get this far, and it sounds like you've done a lot since then. So this is impressive. I'm gonna beat it, by the way, on stream just to show off. But I'm not sure why that second pipe moved. Oh, is this a new mechanic? I like that you went back to the simple level to show off a new mechanic. Since it's such an old game, I won't give a lot of like, you should do this, you should do that, but I would say it's well built. I knew something about computer graphics, so it looks more advanced than it is as a game. Yeah, did you do the art on this as well? Oh, they both move. Okay. So it might get a little more complicated than I thought. It's hard to tell which pipe will move. But I can work with that. Pipe pieces were all made by code, and you made the model and the textures. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. I'm very, very new to modeling. All of my art is really 2D and drawing, so I'm very impressed by even simple models. I use SketchUp for my models now, but code still has its uses for modeling, especially if you want to animate the polygon mesh. Yeah, I think I need to look more into modeling myself. I think I'm really excited about like 3D model generation, so I can get those starting points to edit, which is way easier than starting from scratch. But I wouldn't be able to model these pipes even, so I like that. Kudos. We are almost there, if nothing goes wrong. Surely this guy will move this pipe, and we will... Will this guy move this pipe? Alrighty. We're doing it. Easy peasy. We are on... I think we are on the final level. I don't think that was the final level. Oh, we are back to this level. Why, thank you. This does look different than the level I just did. Oh, okay, cool. Very nice. Good end screen as well. I like it. It looks good. Thanks for sharing that. Well, I'm gonna keep rolling with this demo. We're now at 3 hours, which is only an hour over what I normally do, but kind of want to get that damage to buildings working just so we can have that final game. But let me double check that this, let me check in on this YouTube link real fast. And then we'll jump back into that code. Where did my window go? youtube.com/allthisjazz. How about this jazz? Oh, it's u.tube. YouTube. Oh, that's fancy. I like that. Yeah, I imagine you can do some fun simulation stuff when you have a lot more of the control over the models themselves and their like structure. I think in my simulations they usually get a little bit more limited in basically objects interacting with each other. So I kind of reuse a lot of models that I don't really understand enough to control that much, but that looks pretty. Your students find it disturbing, but you can tell them that Andrew said it looks pretty. So I'm going to jump back now. I think the way that we want to handle damaging buildings, we want to add that same sort of health bar that we added to the units. And the two ways that we could implement damaging buildings, if I jump back to the code, we right now have this sort of logic of finding attackable enemies and attacking them. We could duplicate this and just say like attackable buildings. I don't think that's the best way to do it. I think what we should do instead is create a like parent entity class for both both units and buildings to inherit from. And then we can kind of do this same logic, but have basically a list of entity controllers that have the take damage interface and so on. And our code won't mind if they are units or buildings. It'll be nice and clean as it is. And I think that's the way we want to do it. So I'm going to see if I can rush through that, and then we'll have a working game, and I can fill it up with pretty models and show it off on stream next week when we work on something else. Let's go ahead and do that. And Professor Stevens, I am somewhat new to Unity still, so if you see anything funky that I'm doing, feel free to call me out in the chat and say, yo, why are you doing this, you silly goose? You should do this instead. That would be appreciated. Still trying to learn a bunch of stuff. A lot of the reason I do these demos each week is just to sit down, heads down, work on something for a few hours, work on something new usually, try something new, and ideally get some like feedback from people who know more than me. So doing what I can, and any feedback would be appreciated. Let's create our entity controller, which our unit controller will inherit from. We want to normalize to Windows. Let's say entity controller here. It's mono behavior. We'll pull stuff up like probably health and health label. All this can be fine for units. Don't think there's anything that we also want to bring up to buildings as well. So buildings aren't going to be doing any attacking or moving. It's all units. Cool, so this seems fine. Units want an enemy base that they're always charging towards. Move speed, attacks, and so on. I guess they could have an owner as well. You tell your students that there's not such thing as trial and error, there's only trial and discovery. You learn to do it the right way by doing it the wrong way first. That is some words to live by. But it does help when you do it the wrong way and then learn that that is the wrong way instead of just assuming that that is the way to do things. Do you teach game development or do you teach something else? We're going to add a base controller that is going to be the counterpart to the unit controller that also inherits from entity controller. So let's grab that base controller, inherit from this guy. We want the same sort of start. We could bring that up to entity controller, but I think this is fine right now. We might want to do some separate health displays later. You teach game programming and also computational media. Nice. I wish that there were more game programming classes available when I was in school. I actually, my freshman year in college, one of our projects was to come up with something that we knew about that we could teach a class to other students on. And I did a 1-month class on programming in, I think it was Game Maker. And we taught people how to make Snake. And that was the extent to all of the game development classes that were available. This was it was at Northwest University in Missouri, but I was there as a like dual high school student, college student type thing, where I technically went a couple years early, and so it was just kind of a program within those students. So we didn't have a lot of opportunity to branch out and take more fun courses. We were all very required to go into the core degree stuff. Game Maker is something that I also think is underrated. I used it a little bit. I was very much an RPG Maker kid, and I think I started in like RPG Maker XP or like 2003 or something, and pretty much spent hundreds of hours in every single one until I learned Unity and Game Maker. I still would love to go back and do some more, but now that I am a little more comfortable in Unity, I feel like it'd be more for nostalgia reasons than doing something that I can't necessarily do in Unity. Or I guess it's a little easier to build something quick, but I now know what's possible, so I want a little more control. But I do think Game Maker is really cool. My roommate was very big into Game Maker, and he made some Mega Man type game that was really cool. We don't have a full-blown game major. My game programming course is offered within the Comp Sci major, but we do have an immersive media major, which is more art than games. That's cool. Where do you teach, if you don't mind? I'm sure other people, maybe in the chat, might be interested in somewhere with some game resources. University of Maryland, College Park. Very cool. I haven't spent a lot of time on, that's East Coast, right? But what time I have spent over there has been really pretty. Alright, so near Washington, D.C., we also have a great basketball team. Nice. I'm gonna go ahead and make a base prefab. that doesn't have player controller on it, but does have our health label and also some health. And you know, I think I'm gonna just steal the one off the unit so I don't have to size it the same. So this guy is actually, why are you way off? As a faculty member, I can go to the women's games team for free. The men's team costs, but that's okay with me because the women are much better basketball players. Yeah, that checks out. My dad was a professor in Missouri, and I enjoyed some of the perks that he got as well. Lots of fun stuff on campus to attend that you'd otherwise have to pay a lot more for. He taught English and psychology. Mostly English, though. Let's rig up our enemy base again. Focal point. Put over here. Get our word list database in here as well. Spawn fuzziness of 10 again. Units. I feel like we had spawnable units. Oh, I guess we need the player controller here as well. Human player controller. Oh goodness, real subjects. I hear those are hard. Glad I get to teach games and blinking lights. Yeah, I think every field has difficult subjects and parts of it, or more fun parts too. Oops. This guy gets that. Player base. He needs the input field, word database, fuzziness. We want back to 10. Spawnable units. We want him to be able to spawn a unit. Enemy base should also be able to spawn a unit. And these look fine. Spawn interval of 2. I do make the game students do a few algebra problems. They hate those, but if it were easy, anyone could do it. You know, I always hated math, and as soon as I started doing game development, I started in 3D, and everything is vector math and quaternions and angles and rotations, and I was immediately like, do I really want to make games if there's so much math here? And the answer was yes. I just get by with the math now, but I think being able to make games as a reward is probably the best way to hammer in that math, even if they hate it, because at least there's something fun on the other side. Just making sure all my references are set up again now that these guys are set up from prefabs. I guess I'm going to play it real fast and make sure. We do have really wonky health on the bases, but they do have health. You can ignore a lot of the really esoteric math. One need not ever really know how quaternions work in order to use them. Yeah, my co-founder here, Andrew, is a mathematician, and he laughs at my attempts at the math that I do end up using. Luckily, ChatGPT is really good at vector math and getting things that are at least almost right, so I use a lot of that to get by the math parts now and just double check it where I need to. It's been kind of a boon to be able to focus a little more on the fun stuff and a little less on getting things to rotate at the right speed and so on. Let's fix these health displays on the base, which are rotated pretty poorly, and that's because our base model has the scale on it. So maybe we want to change that, but let's take this guy, well, let's create a model for this guy. Let's bring our capsule, mesh, cylinder, etc. over to that. Well, let's just do it this way. And that should cover our capsule. We take off the base controller, and then here we'll take off the capsule. It's basically moving it down into another object so we can normalize that scale a lot better. This guy, and maybe we bring him up. Like 1, I think is the, yeah. Watch out, I tried some of my homework problems on ChatGPT. It answered a 3D rotation problem correctly, but decided to express the answer in 4 dimensions. Yeah, I've had a lot of issues as well. I usually just hammer at it until it looks correct, and then have my mathematician co-founder look at it and tell me why it's wrong. But I'm learning a little bit as I go. It's coming. Okay, so our model block is now separated out from base controller, which shouldn't be an issue. The colliders are no longer on the base controller script, but if that becomes a problem, we'll deal with it. We want to make sure our enemy base is red, because that transfers its material over to its units. And let's make sure everything's working. Nice to have met you this evening. Off to watch Loki with the wife now. Have fun, good luck. Thanks for checking in. I stream every Tuesday. Feel free to follow if you want to come back, or you know, just discover me again. Nice talking to you. See ya. We have another bug where our own units are now running towards our own base. Let's take a look at that human player controller, and I bet this guy has the same bug that we fixed before, where we're getting the instance ID of the script and not the object it's attached to. So comparing the instance ID of the object itself is what we should be doing. Let's double check that that fixed that. It did not at all. So enemy base. We did just move the enemy base. I bet the tag is on the wrong thing. So So this is tagged base. It does not have the script. You want that untagged. This guy should have tag base. And I saw that null reference exception. Let's see if that shows up again, but this looks fixed at least. Running towards the enemy bases now. No errors. And we'll just double check that they'll fight while we're here. And then let's increase the speed of the units for faster testing so we don't have to go through this again. And then let's write the code for doing damage to the buildings. And if that all works, we will call it for the day. Looks like combat's working. Obviously we don't have any models or animations or sound effects or anything like that. We're just getting the core gameplay working, and still you can, it is a typing game after all, so you can be destroying units as you go. Probably clearing out a nice path for your units to get in, and killing the units that are about to get to your base, and so on. So they're obviously typing the same thing back, so you know, it's a back and forth typing game. Let's go ahead and let's say speed of 5, and then let's update this. So instead of unit controllers, it's looking for entity controllers, which can be units or buildings. And we need to move that take damage, die, and probably explode. Well, let's keep well, we'll just override them on the unit. Let's bring those up to the entity controller. So this guy can now take damage. This, right, we need to go over to that player controller, and instead of units, we now have entity controllers, which will accept units. We just want to make sure we don't also add buildings to that, I guess. But we do actually, let's see, how do we want to do this? Because we could, I think we want to have units and buildings. Base controller. That actually should probably be, let's do building controller so we can add more building links later. It's a little more intuitive of it being compared to a unit controller too. So in the player controller we now have building controllers, buildings, and so I think we want to make this attackable entities nearby. This guy. Do we need a separate function is what I'm asking myself, to specifically look for units or specifically look for buildings? I don't think we do. So this can be a entity controller. The only reason we're doing this is because we don't necessarily want like the buildings to be in the same array as the units. We want to keep them separate, even if we're treating them the same, I guess. So let's refactor just a little bit, and we might end up merging them anyway, but let's see. Entity controller. So a unit goes through, looks for attackable entities nearby, which can be buildings or units, If it finds one, it attacks it, which can attack buildings or units. Waits for the cooldown, keeps attacking. If there's nothing nearby, it looks for nearby entities. Let's say nearby enemy entities and attackable entities. Attackable enemy entities. Looks for nearby entities. If there are any, it moves towards them, so that can be a unit or a building. And otherwise, it always moves towards the enemy base, which is the building. We can probably refactor this to like pick a random building, or just like the first building like this. I don't think that matters too much. We can prioritize the base. It's a building size of 1 anyway, so it's fine. So let's clear that out. I'm sure we have errors. Let's take a look at where they are. So this guy on an entity controller, right. So basically what we want to do is, if this is a unit controller, we want to remove owner.units.remove this. If it's a building controller, we want to remove owner.buildings.remove this. So I think we can actually say, let's try this. If this is a building, remove it from owner.units, owner.buildings, otherwise I think we'll just like check what type we are. If this is building controller, yeah, that's kind of what I was looking for. And that's on entity controller, so that seems fine. Our unit controller does not have a die function that overrides it, but that's probably what we'll end up doing, is just having a die function in the unit controller that plays the die animation and runs this specifically, and then the building controller will get a die function that overrides it that plays like, I don't know, a fire explosion and then removes this. So this is more just for a quick little interface that lets us treat them both as the same during this demo. So let's see if that works. I feel like it just might. Units get spawned. They run towards enemies or the enemy base, which is an enemy, and the base can now take damage. Has a health label, can die. Seems like it just might work. So I'll let them come to me. Maybe I'll create a couple guys that will get fought off. Okay, one got typed out. These guys are taking this guy down. They should come and damage the base. Base has no collider. So why? Right? Is that why they can walk into it? Let's check our physics overlap sphere. Gets all the colliders. Does this guy have a... Does the model have a collider? It does. Right, because we're only looking for unit controller components. So actually here, based on what we saw earlier, we can just do an entity controller here, which will work if it's a unit controller or a building controller, because those are both subclasses of the entity controller. So that should now work. Okay, they're coming in hot. Let's bring out a couple guys. Guess we don't need to test this again, but it's nice to see them run towards enemies. We still want to increase that aggro range a little bit. But why are you not finding anything to attack? Okay, attackable entities nearby. Let's double check that attack range. Let's make it 2. Let's make this 5. Let's make sure there's nothing in the building controller. Okay, that seems fine. Alright, so what we're going to do is, let's make enemy base spawn interval of 15. So we just have 1. And then in here, we will say debug.log bound colliders.length colliders. And we will say debug.log attackable entities, enemies, I guess. Okay, so this should give us some amount of colliders, probably includes all of their allied colliders, so probably not really worth adding. But I guess if there's only 1 unit, let's increase this more, 30 seconds. So 1 unit should find 0 colliders until it gets to our base, then it should find 1 collider, and we should see attackable entities 1. If this runs, we can at least kind of bisect the problem there. So we got 1 guy coming in hot. We have attackable enemies 0, 1 collider is itself. Should see 2 colliders soon. 2 colliders, attackable enemies 0. Okay. Wow. So, entity controller. Does the model, is the collider, yeah, the collider is on a different object than the controller. So, can we say, does get component and get component in parent work? You know what? Let's keep the same sort of interface. Let's just move the collider up to the actual building controller. So our capsule collider, copy component, move it up to this guy, paste component. Model, remove that guy, double check our collider is still there, which it's not looking the right size. Oh, because it's not scaled properly. That's fine. We can just scale it ourselves. Probably. Where's my handles? You know, that's good enough. That'll do. Okay, so now our collider is on the same object that has an entity controller script. Let's see this work. We got 1 guy coming in, probably. Nope, we've erred. Object reference. Well, first of all, these should both be getting the instance ID of the game object, I believe. But that's not the error. Did I break a reference? Entity controller. Owner. Does it not I mean, it finds it now, so it's probably going in the loop. Oh, I see. So it's no longer null, which means what we did was correct, and now it's getting to this where it doesn't have an owner, which its owner is itself, I believe, because units use the base as an owner. So, do we have an owner? We gotta, let's say for a building controller, we say owner is equal to this. Can we do that? Entity controller's owner is a player controller. This get component player controller. That's only going to work for this singular base. Building controller will grab this as the owner, which is fine. Once we add more buildings, we can address that. But they should both set an owner now, so we shouldn't get that error. Probably. Cool. Okay, we got a guy coming in. 1 collider, 0 attackable enemies. Will he attack us? 2 colliders, 1 attackable enemies. Son of a gun, we've done it. And we can spawn units that go in and just run past, I guess. But some of them are close enough. We'll increase the aggro range a little bit, but this is a typing game. You can spawn units, you can destroy units. It works. There's no in-game screen when your base is gone. It's gone, but it works. So looks good to me. I got 5 people in chat. I think what we will do now is find another game development channel and we will send you all that way. But as a send-off, my name's Andrew. I work for a studio called Chroma Golem. We focus on AI in games. Wasn't a lot of AI in this game, but sometimes we just do fun demos. We stream every Tuesday, starting to stream a little more on other days, so you can check in on the Discord for what days those are. But if you scroll down below the video, we got our Twitter, we got our Discord. Feel free to join. Everyone's welcome. It's a bunch of game developers and AI enthusiasts and some gamers, some streamers, so come on in. Yeah, we're making fun games, so we would love to hear about what you guys are working on too. So let's go check out this game development channel. Let's find somebody with not a lot of viewers. Somebody who's writing code. And we'll check them out. What about this guy? It's Godot, but everybody loves Godot, right? Alright, looks good to me. It was nice streaming for you guys. Wait, how do I don't know how I send, do I raid? Okay, I raid from OBS, I think. Raid JD does dev. And I'll send you guys his way. It's been nice streaming. I'll see you guys next week. Peace.